Hello. So today we'll talk about two architects, Richard Neutra and Kisho Kurokawa, an Austrian-American architect. Richard, or Richard, because he lived for a long time and built in the United States. That's why I'm undecided to pronounce Richard like in Austria or Richard. But both ways is the same man, the same architect. And then the important Japanese architect Kisho Kurokawa. I begin with the Neutra. So Richard Joseph Neutra was born on April 8th, and today is April 8th, and that's the reason we talk about him. Was an Austrian-American architect, living and building for the majority of his career in South California. He came to be considered a proeminent and important modernist architect. His most notable works include the Kaufman Desert House in Palm Springs, California. This was the man. And now I show kind of an aide memoir with some of his works, starting with the earliest. Like this house, Auerbacher home in Redlands and San Bernardino County, California, sunny California. The Clark House in Pasadena, California. Certain buildings I will present in more detail, but not all of them. A beautiful landscaping here. The Constance Perkins House, 1955. So we are talking here about an early modernism, but a very convincing one, a cyclorama building at Gettysburg, 1966. This, an institutional building, a public building. Another house in Switzerland, 1962. Richard Neutra. LK Apartments in Los Angeles, 1948. Emerson Community Charter School, 1937-1938, so before the Second World War in Los Angeles. Now, maybe this architecture is not very striking today, but considering that is more than 80 years old, at that time was rather innovative. Jardinette Apartments, Hollywood, 1928, so almost 100 years ago. Resolutely modern building, an apartment building, a block of flats. And this is how it looks like today. So this was built almost 100 years ago. That's not a short time. An earlier picture. Now, one of the most famous works by Richard Neutra, the Kaufman Desert House in Palm Springs, 1946. A beautiful modernist house, an opulent house, situated in a magnificent natural setting. It's called the Kaufman Desert House. I don't know if it's the same Kaufman family that commissioned Frank Lloyd Wright to build the famous Falling Water building, which was also for the Kaufman family, but I don't know if it was the same Kaufman family or not. Anyway, this one is by Richard Neutra. This is a famous photograph of this famous building in black and white, but beautifully, done. It's a great photograph of a very important modern building by Richard Neutra in Palm Springs. That's not him, I think. So this contrast between the simplicity of the volumes, the modernism of the architecture, and the big rocks, I think underlines the creativity of the building. It looks like, I think this is a scene from a movie. It looks like it, a Hollywood movie. I'm sure at least one movie was made in this building and around this building. Richard Neutra. Now, for some reason, I included here in this presentation about Richard Neutra the only private house that Zaha Hadid built. So this is what the client of Zaha Hadid wrote. I told her, I want to wake up in the morning and I want to just see blue sky. I don't want to see any neighbors and I want to feel free, recalls Doronin, the client, in a new video discussing the project. And Zaha Hadid told him, do you realize you have to be above the trees? And she just took a napkin and drew the sketch. I looked and I said I liked it, and this is how we started. And this is the building. In my opinion, it's not a great home. I don't think it's sufficiently intimate. It might be a spectacular building, but I think it's a little bit, I think, too emphatic. And I'm not against, flamboyant creativity, but in the case of a home, I think a little bit of more modesty or attachment to the earth perhaps is beneficial. Maybe that's the reason I included this this building by Zaha Hadid after the famous house that Richard Neutra built, which is still attached to the earth. But this one, in the desire to free oneself, the client, from everything and everybody, alienates, I think, the building from the forest. To situate yourself above the forest, above the trees, seems to be problematic because man is not God. Anyway, a building by a famous architect, the only house that she ever built while alive. Maybe her office will build one day another one, and maybe another one, but during her lifetime, she only built this one. Again, I'm not sure that the house is supposed to look above the trees. I mean, are we to free ourselves from the trees, to free ourselves from nature? being that we ourselves are also nature, and I'm talking about the inner nature, which still exists, if not totally dwarfed, within ourselves. But the forms are impressive, of course. Zaha Hadid in Russia. A giant base for the verticality of the house. It almost looks like an institutional building and not a home. I mean, how many cars are supposed to get in there? Is there parking of alarming dimensions? Maybe. Anyway, but as you can see, there is a duality. On one hand, the building goes underground, and then on the other hand, it goes above the trees. So it's like a double movement. Now we go back to Richard Neutra, the Kelton Apartments in Los Angeles. How subdued and reticent these modernist buildings by Neutra appear in comparison with Zaha Hadid. The Cronish House in Beverly Hills, California. But at that time, when they were built, they were almost revolutionary. There was another Austrian architect, quite interesting and quite good himself, Schindler, who also came to the United States on the western coast of the United States from Vienna, from Austria. One day we'll talk about Schindler as well. Sorry for this picture, it's not very clear, but you have better pictures here. A lot of glass. At that time, there wasn't so much concern with energy loss and energy bill and sustainability. But today, I think we have to be careful. Landfair Apartments, 1937, Richard Neutra. Again, they might not look very impressive today, but in 1937, you know, almost 90 years ago, in fact, 90 years ago, it was a lot of modernity in this building. Los Angeles County Hall of Records, a governmental building, a large building, an institutional building. It still has a certain, dignity as architecture in its simple modernism. Lovell House, this is also another important work by him, 1928, almost 100 years ago. the steel structure, the model. Here we see the interplay between man, the human being, and nature. You know, the rather dramatic sloping terrain. And then the architecture in its, you know, dialectics between light and shadow, with white walls and glass floating. Richard Neutra. A Garden Grove Community Church, a church then, Garden Grove in California. Some people, especially where we are, would not consider this a church, but I admire this. It's simple modernism, and you know, you could say it's just that elongated cross that identifies it as a church. Maybe. Miller House, Palm Springs. Kaufman House, Palm Springs, we already saw it. Now his son, an architect as well. This is a picture with him, and we approach the end of this short presentation on Richard Neutra. This is the son of Richard Neutra, himself an architect, himself aged. Time passes over all of us, and it passed over him too, and it passed over his father as well. So let's wish him happy birthday. And now let's go to the second presentation today on a very different kind of architect from Japan. That is Kisho Kurokawa. Born in 1934 and died 16 years ago, in 2007. Let's read a little bit about him. As I said, he was born also on April 8th. Kisho Kurokawa, born on April 8th, 1934, and died on October 12th, 2007, was a leading Japanese architect and one of the founders of the Metabolist movement. Born in Kaniahi, Kurokawa studied architecture at Kyoto University, graduating with a bachelor's degree in 1957. He then attended University of Tokyo under the supervision of Kenzo Tange. Kurokawa received a master's degree in 1959. Kurokawa then went on to study for a doctorate of philosophy, but subsequently dropped out in 1964. Kisho Kurokawa was conferred an honorary doctorate of architecture by this university, Putra, Malaysia, in Malaysia in 2002. This was the man, Kisho Kurokawa. I like this short statement from him: an uncertainty about existence, a lack of faith in the visible, a suspicion of the eternal. The principles of the Metabolist revolved around ideas of impermanence and change, and as the name suggests, the movement was intended to have more in common with natural processes. Each one a hero, the philosophy of symbiosis. This was a book he published. Each one a hero. I like this title. 1997. He struggled to get commissions early in his career and was so poor that he made his models from noodles, photographed them after they were dry, and then cooked and ate them. Incredible. Kurokawa, who was fluent in English, was an articulate advocate and a prolific writer of deeply philosophical books that discuss the age of life rather than the age of the machine. Good. This is him as a young man, maybe at the time when he was eating his models made of noodles. And this was his wife, an actress, Ayako Wakao, who was a Japanese actress. maybe she's still alive, born in 1933. Yeah. So we move forward. This is him, Kisho Kurokawa, working in his office on a structure. And he founded the Metabolist movement in 1960, the key principle being symbiosis, moving away from the centralized prototype of the European city, centralized squares, for example. It was a radical vision of cities without centers, a web of decentralized cells or modules. Metabolism proposed building spaces and structures in relation to metabolistic structures, which constantly undergo the process of growth, change, circulation, and recycling. It was a symbiosis of culture, design, and nature, a biological, relative, and variable model versus the modernist paradigm. Japan's new National Art Center, a more recent project by him. Here he is in front of images of this, late work by him, and he's dressed, in traditional Japanese clothing, and I think he looks very nice dressed like this. He was around 70 when he took that picture of himself. This is when that picture was taken of him. This is the building, Japan's new National Art Center. Concrete, glass. Concrete pollutes a lot, as you know, but at that time, I guess there was less concern about it. But today, I think we do have to consider it very seriously. Concrete does pollute, mainly because of the cement that it uses. And glass, on the other hand, is a material which has its qualities and its advantages, but it encourages energy losses, unfortunately. So I'm not so sure it is a material that responds to the sustainability agenda. And I am not saying it demagogically. Kisho Kurokawa. Here he is again with a little model of a house. Now this is we are going to see this is a famous, in fact, it was demolished recently, and it's very sad. It's a building with, it was a building with, prefabricated, living units, extremely, ergonomical, minimal. Unfortunately, this famous tower was demolished. Here we see some pictures that one would not expect in Japan, but life is not in its essence very different, from one place to another. This is the building, and it was a very spectacular tower and very famous, built in accordance with the Metabolist principles. And these units were brought to the building site from the factory and assembled in this way. Unfortunately, it was demolished not too long ago. Very sad. Because there was idealism in this structure, and it still functioned. I only hope they didn't demolish it in order to build a parking lot, as they demolished in the United States the famous Larkin building by Frank Lloyd Wright in order to so-called build build a parking lot. Here he is again like a samurai. And now some more pictures inside this tower, with images of life as lived and not life as imagined. Real people with real disorder, with a lot of clutter, with a monitor and, all kinds of accessories that make our life both interesting and, demanding. So this is the building, Kisho Kurokawa, a metabolist building, which unfortunately does not exist any longer. And this is the plan of one unit. The whole space is 4 times the dimensions of the bathroom. But everything, every square inch is rigorously used. It was built very economically. As you can see, there are no, lost spaces here. But some people consider that it had to be demolished. Very sad. Highly technologized, of course, although looking at the TV there is an old-fashioned TV. Another inhabitant of this building, this famous building, which does not exist any longer. But to live in Tokyo, it's very expensive. So to even have a bicycle inside your room is a luxury. And if that bicycle is also a neighbor of some bananas, even better. When we think of Japanese architecture, we don't think of such images. But real life is real life everywhere on this earth, including in Tokyo, including in Japan. This is not Katsura. This is not a building built for, emperors. It was a building for, people like you and me. And people like you and me, are not very different from him, and so on. An interesting building, though. A little bit mechanicist, but this aspect exists in the works of Kisho Kurokawa, but it was an attempt to bring together technology and biology. But even with, the most noble ideas, a towel needs to be hanged somewhere, and here it is on a door, just as I do, the door of the bathroom. So even the most noble system has its limits, and life takes over with its picturesque attributes, with its qualities, and with its problems. Another lonely man here, looking through the round window of his inhabitable and inhabited cell. Seen from construction, that's how these little homes for individual people were brought in. Now the Helix City is a rather utopian project, or maybe without rather is an utopian project. but you see here as well the interest in the DNA, in the helix, in the helicoidal movement of the genetic forces that sustain life and create life, the DNA of life, externalized here through architectural means. A resort center in Hawaii, Dreamland in Yamagata, 1967. This almost looks like a sand painting of some indigenous people. Very interesting plan. It was built. Architecture is a theater stage setting where the leading actors are the people, and to dramatically direct the dialogue between these people and space is the technique of designing. Kisho Kurokawa. It was built just one, but I think he planned at least two. Well, three we see in this plan, but only one was built. Very nice graphic representation of this somehow mysterious project. Okay, the Yamagata Hawaii Dreamland Resort Center in an island city was a miniature megastructure by Kurokawa. It sounds so strange, a miniature megastructure. The design concept evolved from the architect's theoretical project Metamorphosis from 1965, which envisioned an organic city consisting of a number of interlocking loops, each forming a self-contained urban quarter. When the city expanded, it would grow simply by adding more loops, mimicking the duplication of cells. As a result, the city would stretch out in a natural linear pattern, distinct from both the radial form of most existing cities and the rigid linear configuration of the earlier megaforms like Kenzo Tange's Tokyo Bay project. Metamorphosis confirmed Kurokawa's commitment to the architecture of life. The loop was first employed in a master plan for Hishino New Town in Aichi, which was organized into three loop-shaped residential districts with civic and commercial facilities located along their interfaces. Design concept description by Kisho Kurokawa architects. This building that we just looked at is based on a metabolic architecture of cell. It is also a ring architecture, loop architecture of circulation. Architecture of no center is another manifesto of the age of life. Now, an agricultural city, almost oxymoronic, this expression, 1960, Kisho Kurokawa, again, a study, if you want, an Utopian. Japanese architect Kisho Kurokawa designed in 1960 the agricultural city intended for the replacement of the agricultural towns of Aichi destroyed by the Isebei typhoon in 1959. The accommodation was to be raised above the ground to deal with future flooding. The grid was intended to be between 300 and 500 meters. Kurokawa challenged the assumption that the city and the country, sorry, I don't see, something is covering the text here. Okay, need to be in antagonism. And yes, I like the fact that he challenged this assumption, because I think there is a future in trying to bring together the city with the country, meaning with a rural part of a country. Yes, to bring together the urban and the rural. He still uses a system and based on a grid, Cartesian, system. But we saw in the previous project that he was also able to work with outside of the restrictions of the Cartesian system, where he invoked the cell. Here is a more rational, so to speak, cell. Or maybe because he wanted to place the willful system of man or of the human being into the natural setting of rurality or the rural. It's possible. So it is an architecture of dialectical relationships. So this architect who built a lot also spent time and resources to, explore things that, some people would describe as utopian. Why not? We see some echoes of from traditional architecture, but we still see, the ordering grid. Here he is with an interesting, maybe wise smile on his face. As a younger man, Kisho Kurokawa. Now the Toshiba IHI pavilion at the Osaka Expo in 1970 is was a futuristic building at the famous Osaka 1907 World Exhibition. Osaka will host again a world exhibition in 2025, 2 years from now. But this edition from 1970 was famous, and Kisho Kurokawa collaborated with Kenzo Tange, with Kiyonori Kikutake, with other architects, Arata Isozaki, and it was a very successful world exhibition. We see the system here too, but we also see the longing for life, the longing for biology, the longing for the organic, but a structured organic, if this doesn't sound oxymoronic. A lot of technology, Japan, Osaka, 1970. Sorry. Again, the references to traditional architecture are powerful, and this is the virtue of Japanese architecture, that even in their most extravagant, new, futurist longings, they are rooted in a very deep way in the architectonic, not only architectonic culture of their country. It's a luxury they have. I don't know where this is. It's a Southwest Wales Maggie's Cancer Caring Center. I think, yeah, it's in Southwest, in Wales. Yeah, applying the same principles of metabolism to a building, an institutional building in Wales. He built a lot. He also built in Amsterdam the museum for Vincent van Gogh, this formidable painter who died at 37 in exasperation because he was misunderstood. He was not understood. He had almost nothing to eat, and he wanted to free himself from the burden on his brother, who died not much later, although a little bit younger than Vincent van Gogh. And they are both buried together now. Anyway, this is the cancer center built in Wales, but by Kisho Kurokawa. Nagoya City Art Museum, 1983-1987. There were some influences coming from postmodernism on him too. a little bit, and unfortunately, but not, alarmingly. Kisho Kurokawa. And again, a picture of the Osaka 1970 World Exhibition with a building that he built, this one. Now, the Van Gogh Museum that I mentioned, exposition wing, Amsterdam, that's it. The glass part was added later. So he built what we see on the left side. And the right side was also based on his sketches or his, early design initiative, but it was built, I think, by other architects. So he built this one, what we see here. And this was added later in Amsterdam. So if you arrive in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, maybe you will remember to visit this building by Kisho Kurokawa. Now here might be a sculptural work by Richard Serra. It looks like it in front of it, in front of the building by Kisho Kurokawa. A lot of glass here, if you ask me, too much glass. But at that time when it was built, there wasn't a strong, resistance to the loss of energy that we should be very careful about these days. National Ethnology Museum, Osaka, again, Kurokawa, 1977. Echoes here from some Southeast Asian old architectures. This courtyard with these steps. You wonder what their function are, what its function is, this courtyard. But it does look impressive. A very large building. The Osaka Expo Takara Butillion is another structure built by Kisho Kurokawa in 1970 in Osaka. Here it is, very future oriented, still striking somehow in its optimism about the future, about systems, about technology, and about systems and technology trying not to estrange themselves from life and from the biological, undercurrents. The metabolist Kisho Kurokawa. We remember that he founded this movement in architecture in 1960. He didn't work alone. There were a few other architects associated with him. Metabolism in architecture, an important architectural movement in the 60s. In Tokyo, Japan, there are too many people and not enough space. So what do architects do? They maximize on that space, creating trendy and affordable micro apartments. This is not by him. It's by a mathematician and student of medicine, if I remember well, Arakawa, who worked with his partner and built these apartment buildings, this apartment building in Tokyo, very differently from what Kurokawa did. But look at this picture of minimal spaces. My God, it has less than 1 meter, the width of this space. Or look here, two people And they seem to enjoy themselves in this, almost surreally narrow space. So maybe we don't need a lot of space in order to be happy. Or here. The Museum of Modern Art in Saitama, Kisho Kurokawa, function as a criterion in architecture achieved many things, but it also resulted in the articulation and concretization of space. In the process of providing rationally and clearly articulated spaces, the virtues of nebulous and undifferentiated space that naturally exist between demarcated areas was totally neglected. Spaces which might embrace two or more meanings were eliminated in functional architecture. I think his criticism was and is valid. I too have great or big question marks about functionalism, which erased many other virtues of architecture. Intercultural architecture, the philosophy of symbiosis. The philosophy of symbiosis, these are covers of books. The Kuala Lumpur International Airport, designed by him. We see a system, but we see also some fluidities, curvatures, a lot of glass steel, well functioning though, despite his, resistance to the demands of a stringent functionalism, he still made functional buildings like this airport. And an airport has to be functional. Everything, as is the case with the Japanese, everything is designed to the most minute detail and perfectly executed. Kuala Lumpur International Airport, Kisho Kurokawa. And here he is again as a wise samurai. I wish we dressed like this again in a romantic, maybe even nostalgic ways. Why not? Capsule House, 1973. Again, the dialectics between the natural landscape and the work of man, willful as it is, maybe a little bit too willful. But we see the capsule, as in that tower with capsules in Tokyo. And here is the house, the plan. We're approaching the end of the presentation. The black capsules of Kisho Kurokawa, surrounded by very accommodating trees, always beautiful and always generous. The Museum of Modern Art in Wakayama, headquarters of the Japanese Red Cross Society, Tokyo, 1975, 1977. The dramatic entrance. Osaka City, Osaka. Walter Gropius, in the Bauhaus Manifesto, he wrote, "Together we will want, think up and create the new building of the future, which will be everything in one shape, architecture, sculpture, and painting, which from millions of hands of craftsmen will rise once towards the heavens as a crystal symbol of a new coming phase." This was the end of the short manifesto written by the founder of the famous school, the Bauhaus, Walter Gropius, in 1919. And the last word of that short manifesto was phase. Now, what is the relationship between the manifesto by Gropius and Kisho Kurokawa? Well, I think it's about similar idealism and a desire to unite art or architecture with life, and a desire for, collective efforts. This is another tower he built in Tokyo. Now, the Museum of Science in Hime, Japan, 1991-1994, a rather large museum with a conical glass structure. And there is also, a fragment of a sphere, pure forms, geometry, and again, life or biology to an extent, at least to an extent. But I feel that in the work of Kisho Kurokawa, the balance between the spirit of geometry and the spirit of fineness is a little bit in the favor of the spirit of geometry, or willfulness, will, the human will. In Melbourne, he built something similar, and here it is, the Kisho Kurokawa cone, Melbourne, Australia. And we look at the old tram car. And we end the presentation with a little bit of furniture design, the folding chair. This is a folding chair, but it has, some echoes from, some furniture done by Macintosh. There are differences as well, it's true. Is it a comfortable chair? I don't know. Maybe not so much, but a chair sometimes forgets about comfort and becomes plastically engaging. The fractal chair, I don't know exactly the justification for the word fractal. I only hope it doesn't fracture your bones in the back. But sculpturally or plastically is, interesting and engaging. And here he is again, dressed like a man who ignores the passage of time and who has probably a certain nostalgia for a time that maybe was not exactly as we imagine it was. Let's wish him happy birthday. Thank you.